do from time to time, I will repurpose comics that have already run on sheldoncomics.com over on the Instagram. They're sliced up now. Beth slices them up and preps them, puts them onto Later, that app that lets you preload things for Instagram. And so on Memorial Day weekend, I just grabbed a comic that she had slotted up. There's about 20 in the queue. And I put it up on Instagram, right? And it happened to be a joke about weight loss, working out. And the punchline, for lack of a better phrase, was Arthur basically saying to Gramp, all right, bring it down a notch, Kathy, right? And referencing Kathy Geiswhite's strip, Kathy, right? I put it up on Instagram. I go about my Memorial Day. I check in on it later on in the day. And lo and behold, who has responded to it but Kathy Geiswhite herself? And I was like, oh, hey, Kathy, that's fantastic. And so she loved it, and she wants to swap art. So I'm going to go look in my archive, see if I still have that one, and then I'll swap her for a Kathy original, which is delightful to me. That makes me so happy. You know me as a lover of original art.
Do you have a Kathy yet?
I have a sketch that Kathy did for me while we were filming Stripped. She did a sketch on film, like, because we wanted to capture her drawing Kathy, right? You know? And so at the end of it, she's like, oh, hey, do you want it? And I was like, heck yeah, I want it. And so I have that up in my studio in one of the smaller frames. You know the ones that hang between my windows? I don't know if you remember that. There's a Jeff Smith there, and anyway, it doesn't matter. But I don't have a Kathy original, and I would love to have a Kathy original. That would be great. So I'm pleased as punch by the fact that Kathy rolled with it, that she found it delightful that Kathy was being referenced. When in essence, it was a little bit taking the mickey, you know, in terms of Kathy as a comic strip. But she loved it. She loved the reference. She rolled with it. And also, it gives me a chance right now to say publicly that Kathy Geiswhite is one of the classiest and funniest people in comics, and I legitimately think she is awesome. I've said this before on the show, but she is a fantastic human being.
And without a doubt, one of the more important people in comics history in terms of the role she played and what she did for her time in terms of breaking barriers and you know, glass ceilings and so on and so forth. And not only that, but she delivered the goods. I mean, when you look at especially the early Kathy strips, she was just a really, really good writer.
And also, as a businesswoman, the savvy to go to Sparky and to go to Mort Walker and say, like, how do I license this? How do I bring Kathy to the next level, right? And Sparky took her through it. And I don't know if you remember, Brad, growing up in the 70s and 80s, there was a huge licensing line at Hallmark of Kathy stuff.
Yes.
And the calendars, the stuffed dolls, a lot of mugs. There always seemed to be a lot of Kathy mugs at offices, you know. And she did gangbusters in the 70s and 80s and into the 90s with Kathy. And then also, a little unremarked thing is that Kathy herself, as a person, was an amazing spokesperson for comics. Appearing multiple times on Johnny Carson. And on, I think she did a couple other, I mean, a lot of morning talk shows, obviously, but just getting on Johnny Carson when he was at the height, and being able to hold her own and go toe-to-toe. Like, she was funny and charming and delightful. And like, that raised the game for comics and the overall visibility for comic strips in the nation a lot. At a time when comic strips were kind of diminishing in the public sphere, you know, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, she was out there publicly raising it up on Johnny Carson.
She's fantastic, and you can find very few spokespeople as good at what they did as she is. So I can totally get why you're excited about getting this kind of response and the possibility of getting original art from such a great creator.
Yeah, I just think she's a great person, and I just wanted to give her a public shout out that I think she's awesome, and also it's nice when you meet your heroes and they are great, you know? I can name a few cartoonists that weren't, and Kathy is not one of them. Kathy was great.
Maybe we'll save that for Cocktails with ComicLab, Dave.
That's great. And so on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to ComicLab, the show about making comics.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, editor of Webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc.,
and I'm his friend Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/ComicLab. So Dave, let's talk about our special offer.
That's right. From now until the 4th of July, a little date known as the 4th of July, which, by the way, someone in my house who's very young said, hey, when does the 4th of July happen? And I said, come on, you're not that young. It's the 4th of July. It's in the date. And then he laughed. He laughed solidly for 5 minutes when I told him that. Anyway, if you join at the $5 level over at patreon.com/ComicLab by July 4th, here is what you get. This is not a small list, so tuck in, get a cup of coffee, because I'm about to give you a big list of all the awesome things you're going to get. You're going to get the ebook of how to make webcomics. It's gone through 4 printings at Image Comics, and you are now going to get it as a free ebook. You're going to get the ebook of Webcomics Handbook from Brad Geiger, the amazing follow-up to How to Make Webcomics. Mm-hmm. You're going to get Drive Act 1. That's my 280-page collection of the full Drive Act 1. You're going to get Evil Ink Under New Management, which is Brad's amazing collection, the most recent collection for Evil Ink.
Yep.
You're going to get an exclusive Cocktails with ComicLab, which will be our Zoom session where Brad and I pour a tasty adult beverage and talk shop about comics and cartoonists. And it's going to be delightful.
And you, as a ComicLab listener, have an exclusive invite. You get to join us. So you're not only going to get the show later when we put it up, you're going to be participants of Cocktails with ComicLab.
That's right. And not only that, you're going to get all the things you normally get at the $5 level. Yeah. So you will get every show early, which is something that the patrons get. You're going to get 50, maybe 60 hours, I think, of exclusive Patreon podcasts that we've done just for backers, called ProTips. And I think it is 60 hours of podcasts now.
It's getting way up there now.
So if you have churned through our entire run, and some of you have, there's now 60 hours of podcasts waiting for you when you join. And you get to ask a question of the show at the $5 level. Yes. So Brad, in case you were wondering, that's 4 ebooks. That's Cocktails with ComicLab, or Drinks with Dinks, as Brad wanted to call it. You get every show early. You get 60 hours of pro tips, and you get to ask a question of the show, all when you join at the $5 level on patreon.com/ComicLab by July 4th.
Absolutely. And we're going to be looking forward to you joining our community, not only on Patreon, but you're going to also, Dave, one more thing, and it's hard to list them all, the Discord server. You're going to be able to join our community on the Discord server, and it delights me every time we have a new person join us on Discord and they say, oh my gosh, this is such a great place. You can share thoughts, ideas. It's very friendly, very welcoming, very positive. It's a good place to get, if you're looking for criticism, to get some honest to goodness constructive criticism on what you're doing, and just a great place to talk comics. And that's all part of what you're in for when you join us on Patreon.
And there's one other thing, we didn't discuss it before, but I'm gonna offer it up without even consulting Brad. How about some delightful photos of Brad that we'll just forward along to you? Just tasteful stuff, like Brad maybe in a suit, like having a glass of wine. There's a photo for you. Yeah. That's one right there.
Yeah.
Brad by the fire, stroking like a bloodhound. That's another photo you could have at the $5
splayed
level.
out on a bearskin rug, Burt Reynolds style.
Yeah, Burt Reynolds style, with one leg kind of leaning forward, just enough to just enough to keep the dream alive. So all those photos can be yours. By the way, the big disclaimer there.
Yeah,
is,
we gotta put that at a higher level. That's we're not giving away the golden goose over here. We gotta put that higher.
No one's gonna buy the cow if we give away that milk for free.
That's right.
Well, Brad, before we get too far, we already have our special guest. The red light is blinking, so let me hit a button, turn a knob here, and welcome our special guest onto the show. Well, Bradley J. Geiger, we have a special guest coming from... Well, actually, I didn't check with you, Karla, on where you are at this moment. Are you in New Mexico, or where are you?
I'm in Arizona.
Oh, in Arizona. Now. That's right. I knew you were in the American Southwest, and I forgot to check with you before we opened on the mics. But Karla Pacheco is with us. And Karla, the author of Inspector Pancakes, the current fantastic run, Spider-Woman, the upcoming run as of July, right, for Betty Page. And possibly one of the funniest people alive in comics. Karla, thank you for coming on the podcast to join us today.
What an intro. Damn.
Well, killed a bear with her bare hands. I know that. Like, I'm trying to think what else I could add on there.
Hey, bear.
Hey,
bear. Hey, bear.
I like how you said it like a woman walking out of a shopping store with like a bunch of bags from Macy's. Like, hey, bear. Hey.
Carla, you had to jump off of a houseboat to get here. Is that correct?
Yes, I quite literally jumped ship.
Yeah.
Usually I live on a boat named the Slippery Pig up in Washington. But when the pandemic started happening and everything was locking down, like they actually were getting ready to close the marina.
Yeah.
Oh,
And there's really no place worse possible to be sick or just quarantined than by yourself on a boat in Washington, in a very,
yeah.
very small town in Washington. So I literally jumped ship and ran down to be with my partner, who is a stuntman down in
Really?
Arizona. Yeah, he is a stuntman and software architect. He's cool.
Wow, that's very cool. I don't know that I've ever asked you, how did your ship get the name? Oh, I don't know if ship is the right word. How did your boat get the name Slippery Pig?
It's actually that's how I knew it was my boat. I didn't name it that.
Oh, really?
It was already named that, and it is this garish little sea wagon. It looks like a child's drawing of a tugboat. It's just like bright yellow and green, just this ridiculous sea wagon. And when I went to look at it, I walked up, and the person who was selling it was just like, "Oh, I'll walk around first, take a look." And I walk up, and I see just in gorgeous gilt letters, "The Slippery Pig." And I turned to the guy and I said, "The fuck, this is named the Slippery Pig." Um, and he goes, "Yep." I go, "Well, I guess it's my boat."
Yeah.
And is that a good spot? Is that a conducive spot for writing? Like sitting on the water,
Oh, it's the
looking
best.
out?
I sit out on the deck of my boat. I have my laptop just set out, and I'm just looking at seals. And even during the winter, I'll get bundled up and I'll still go out there because that's my
Yeah.
favorite place to work. Because there's all these different winter birds, like fancy ducks with crests.
Yeah.
Who they winter on the inlet, so you get all this amazing wildlife. And yeah, it's I'm on the water, it's fresh ocean air,
Wow.
shrieking seagulls, trying to eat starfish off my pier. And I usually so starfish on the Pacific coast were almost completely wiped out a few years back
Oh,
because
really?
there was some sort of bacterial infection that they all got. But they started returning. And so around my deck, I've got a lot of just gorgeous, like bright purple and orange starfish, and sea anemones and all sorts of stuff. So that's the reason why frequently, anytime I see a seagull try to rip one off the pier, and they're trying to swallow an entire starfish
Yeah.
in their huge gaping maws. So I'll just start screaming like, "No, no, go, no!" And
And
then
so your slow transition towards crazy person on a boat is becoming.
it wasn't slow. I wouldn't say that.
What's
But
Karla doing? She's yelling at birds. That's what
no,
Karla's doing.
no, not even that. I'm like booting it down the dock to
Yeah.
slap it out of their mouths. And then I'm just like, "I saved you."
Yeah. I
Go
hope you
back to your
appreciate it.
sea land. Yeah, back to your water home, my friend.
Yeah.
So tell us, Karla, because I think I know, but I don't know the whole story. What was your journey to getting into comics? Did you grow up loving comics? Was that a big
It wasn't huge. Like I really loved the X-Men TV show, the cartoon, when I was a kid.
Oh yeah, that 80s, 90s one? Yeah.
Because it
And
had
then,
the best theme song, right?
oh yeah.
It's hard to
Yeah.
beat the X-Men theme song. What you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I remember my brother and I would just always watch that after school. But other than, the odd Archie comics and stuff, as a child and a teenager, I wasn't really into them. When I was in my mid 20s or something, I had moved out to LA.
Mm-hmm.
This would have been, I think, like 2005 or 6. I had moved out to LA and didn't know anybody other than my boyfriend at the time.
Right.
And I didn't have a car.
Oh no.
Yeah.
In LA.
Or a job. And
Also a no.
so I'm just sitting in, and we had a roommate, so I would just be sitting in this one little bedroom by myself all day while Jay was at work. And so I ended up reading the entire run of X-Men from the very first Stan Lee in '63. I think it was Astonishing X-Men #1, all the way to the '90s.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, so that's what I did that summer.
You just mainlined the X-Men.
Yeah, it was a lot of X-Men.
So can I ask you, because I don't know that I've ever known anyone who's done this. Do you find, because I bet this is the case, when you power through it like that, do you find 1,000 inconsistencies over the course of like 30 stories where like four writers came in and left, and then like Jubilee was over here, now she's over here. What's going on? Like,
it's actually I'm the weirdo comics writer who I personally think continuity kills. Like, just write a good story. I don't care about I respect canon, and especially with Spider-Woman. I've been very, very, because it's one of my favorite characters. I've tried to be very respectful of the canon that has been built already, and for me to use that and push that forward in the story is really important to me without just going like reboot. But at the same time, I also feel like it's more important to make the story good than to lose your mind over every single detail. I do try to be pretty precise, but even like Spider-Woman has had multiple origin stories. You know, a lot of her canon. I remember editor Jake Thomas that I work with, like early on when we were talking about where we wanted to take the story. He even flat out said, he's like, yeah, a lot of her continuity never really stuck. It's a 43-year-old character. And it was fun.
She's 43 years old now?
So this is cute, Dave. The very, very first appearance of Spider-Woman was in, what was it? Marvel Spotlight #32, which came out February 10th, 1977, the exact day I was born.
Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow. And for those following along at home, we can now steal Karla's identity with just one more. In the course of this information, we just need to get one more bit of information out of her, and then we can successfully steal her ID. This is going to be easy. So, Brad, at some point, we have to work into conversation the Social Security system, and that'll be our lead-in.
Just even if we go roundabout, just find out the name of her favorite pet or her grade teacher's name.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
favorite restaurant. Yeah.
You know, so let's all go around and talk about our mother's maiden names.
I'll begin. Oddly enough, my mother's maiden name was Smith. Hers was named Jones.
Jones,
yep. Karla.
Yeah, exactly. So 43 years old. So 43 years of canon.
Yeah.
And also, I think at least as far as I can remember, 2, if not 3 different major origin stories, right?
Yeah.
And so how do you, as an author, Marvel comes to you, and by the way, let's circle back around on that in a minute, but Marvel comes to you and says, we'd like you to write Spider-Woman.
Yeah.
And then how do you decide, okay, I'm going to go with option A or B or C, or a melding of 2 of them, or,
They very much gave me the option to choose. They're like, yeah, you've got a couple of different things to pick from. It's like, yeah. I mostly am using Brian Michael Bendis's Spider-Woman Origins, because that was one of my first and favorite Spider-Woman runs.
Yeah.
Because I really liked what he had done with her in Avengers, and I really liked Origins. I thought it was kind of like he used one of the previous Origins, but kind of gave it a more modern boot. And so I definitely I used that one as a lot of my foundation pieces,
right?
While also going back through and finding kind of some deep cut characters that I've incorporated. So it's been pretty fun. It's been exciting.
Speaking of animated series, were you also a fan of the Spider-Woman animated series? Because if you go back and look at that, That's
it's
also kind of
bonkers.
quirky and wonderful in its own way, right?
I like quirky. Quirky as a word is not the right word. It was cuckoo bananas, that
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, no, it was bonkers, and it still is, and it's now available. Here, let me do my company shill thing. Now
Where is it
now
available, Karla?
now available on Disney Plus.
That's right.
Ah. So take us back in time then. So how does that relationship come along? Where because you were doing backup stories and one shots, right?
Yeah, yeah.
For Marvel. And then how does it come about where when they're going to relaunch a title or bring give it more a new and big push? How do they come to you? What is that conversation? How did that work out for you?
Well, it's like I've told this story before, but I was literally camping. I was doing dispersed camping out in the Arizona desert by myself on a mountaintop.
Okay.
And I would get an occasional signal, and they just emailed and asked if I'd be interested in pitching for the new Spider-Woman series. And after I finished running around a campfire a little bit, I was like, yeah, that sure, of course. Why? Certainly. I'd be pleased to send you my thoughts. So then I went down to an old abandoned mining town and stole Wi-Fi, so I could upload my pitch.
What is this story that you're telling us? And then I met an old prospector named Big Jim, and Big Jim had a Wi-Fi card.
And a few choice thoughts on Spider-Woman.
Yeah. Here's where you want to go right now, Karla. This character is important to
me. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a, in my mind, this is all perfectly normal,
Yeah.
But yeah, so I came up with a couple different ideas, some directions that I thought would be cool to take it. But also I knew they were asking other people to pitch for the series.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just like, I've been stinking up on a mountain for a week, like just having bonfires and drinking fireballs. So I was like, I'm not going to get it. I'm going to send it. And then they're like, no, we love it. We refined the direction that we wanted to take it. And it was basically, it's like, we want to do big, stupid action. I was like, I am your gal. Because if you need big and stupid, you came to the right place, son.
And so for writing Spider-Man, what's been the highlight for it? Like, have you arced it out and then you're going issue by issue, or are you tackling it with a vague awareness of the arc, but going
no. We had a very specific, like the first 5 issues, like this first arc was extremely planned out. What's cool is issue 5 of this arc will end the current storyline and open up into a whole new one that we're working on now. I'm working on 6 right now, and then that leads into a whole new cool thing. But issue 5 will actually be Legacy number 100. So not only will we be finishing off this first arc, it'll also be the 100th issue of Spider-Woman.
Wow.
Yeah. So we've got something a little special planned for it. Number 5 will actually be a 30-page special, and there's a really cool little tribute to everything we've loved about Spider-Woman over the years, as well as a lead into the next series.
That's very cool.
Sounds exciting.
No, I'm really happy with it. I think the book has just turned out to be something so incredibly special. Like what Pere Perez is doing on the art there, it's just been such a great way to work with him. Like in some spots, basically doing Marvel style like writing, where I'll just be like, okay, so here I need just punching dinosaurs for 2 pages. And Pere is just on it. I'm on it.
Can do.
So
been
no,
doing that in my notebook since junior high. I really deliver on this.
Pere's like, this is my time to shine.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's just really turned out. He turns out such dynamic, great action. And for this book, for this series, we're just doing really over the top, like I try to make it funny and smart, but also it's just like, it's big action movie stuff. And
Yeah.
I don't think Jess has had that for a really long time. So yeah, I've been really excited about it. We're having a lot of fun with it.
And then as the writer, did you get to consult at all on which look you could go with for her?
They were already working on a new costume, but I got to figure out why she had the new costume, and it
Oh,
was a
that's
lot of fun.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is fun.
And so that's actually in issue 1. We've got a second story in issue 1 that basically it's like new suit, who dis? Uh, and it's Paulo Sciarra on the art for that one, but it explains how Jess got her new suit, and
Yeah.
I think I think it really works for the story that we're telling right now. It's darker. She's not feeling in a good headspace.
Mm-hmm.
Everything has changed. She's a loner, going off doing stuff. So I feel the new suit just works really perfectly for that.
And that's actually a nice moment to talk about creativity, because a lot of people ask all of us, hey, where do you get your ideas and stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it is just if you present or take on a reality, like this new suit, right? And then you have to say, all right, now I'm going to figure out what the background is. Like, it's
Yeah,
not like.
I mean, for me, that's always the favorite part of writing comics for me is the problem solving.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
always my favorite part of writing comics, even working on stuff that I'm creating completely wholesale, like my own problems. It's
Mhm.
like I love figuring out how do I get from point A to point B, plus possibly involving these other factors that either existed beforehand or that I wrote myself into a corner for. That's where you get the helicopter explosions.
But you're right. It's a lot of logistical thinking of like, how do all these pieces fit together?
Right.
It's not a pure writing process. It's almost like project planning or administrative planning, or
Oh,
that kind of thing.
the first time I ever wrote like a comic script, I described it as feeling like I was suddenly in the Matrix. It was so exciting to me, and I really like. I've only been writing comics for a couple of years.
Mhm.
Like it's
Hmm.
been fairly recent. I think like the first story I did for Marvel at all was like just like one of the backup stories, like maybe 2 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And so this has actually happened fairly fast, and this is my full series. But the first time I wrote a comic script, I remember just like I just felt like I was coming home. Like
Yeah.
it just like I'll get emotional about it because I just love that feeling like you're in the Matrix and you can see every little like the secret I set up in this panel that won't show up for 3 more issues. Like
Mhm.
someone's going to come back and read that one and oh, it's going to blow their mind.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that's where a lot of the joy is realizing that people upon rereading this are gonna catch all of that stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
layering in things I just find super, super exciting, and
Mhm.
plotting the stuff out fairly far in advance like we've been doing. I just think that's just so much fun. Like I love doing the one shots, like the annuals, like the Punisher annual or the Fantastic Four 2099 annual.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Those are great because you've just got 30 pages to go nuts.
Yeah.
Um,
No consequences,
Yeah.
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 you just go with it.
Oh, I mean, I killed the entire Fantastic Four. Like,
Sure, as you should. That's what that's.
um, so it's like, I sent Punisher and J. Jonah Jameson into space,
Yeah.
to fight the Brood Queen. So doing those type of things are just so much fun, but I really love the possibilities with the series because, again, we have these arced out pretty tightly, because the pandemic has kind of put a lot of publishing and like distribution plans and
Mhm.
put a bit of a kink into the hose.
Right.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
um, so a few things that we had it planned for later on, we're waiting to see if we're still doing that or if we're doing something that's also cool, but we're still going.
Right.
Yeah.
Um,
Right. Right.
but it's trying to figure out like exactly where you're putting everything for the future. that's the best part of writing comics, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I will say to you what I've said to Ryan North and to Chris Hastings, which is my one request to you as a friend is if you can in some way work in Paste Pot Pete into your Marvel Comics storytelling. He is the dumbest character in all of Marvel. And I think so far, Christopher Hastings got it into, I don't remember what he worked it into. And I think Ryan worked it into Squirrel Girl, Paste Pot Pete at some point.
I'll see what I can do.
Karla, I will say this to you. At some point in Spider-Woman in the background, you've got to have Paste Pot Pete. The dumbest character in like he fights with paste. It's like literally it's not even glue. They call it paste.
Yeah.
Like, could you have a character that's more designed for a 5-year-old than a guy named Paste Pot Pete?
I mean, maybe it's nutritional paste. Like,
like tomato paste.
Well, no, I just like, you eat paste. It's still paste, but it's but yeah, maybe he's just like double, quite literally double dipping of.
Yeah, true. Well, let me ask you. So, since we're on the topic of comics for kids, let me ask you real quick about Inspector Pancakes because this is the perfect transition.
which is definitely Inspector.
Like if you're a parent, you're really going to want to sit up and take notice for this next segment of the conversation. So, one of my favorite projects you have ever done was probably 4 years ago. My timeline gets screwy, but about then, right? Inspector Pancakes is ostensibly a children's book with an adorable dog named Inspector Pancakes, right? Yes. Why do you take folks through it?
Well, it's so the full title of the book is, of course, Inspector Pancakes helps the president of France solve the White Orchid murders. And it looks like a little golden book, quite literally, until you look a little closer. But all the art, and there's a large print story that you can read aloud to little kids. And surprisingly, little kids love it.
It's a cute story.
It's a little dog. And that actually is my dog, Edison.
Oh, is it? Oh, I didn't know that.
He was the model for Inspector Pancakes and also the inspiration.
Nice.
And so in the fine print, there's just a little gem, which is the book is actually 2 stories in one. The large print children's story, and then in the fine print, an incredibly grisly and extremely graphic noir.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically a series of murders across Paris, right?
Yeah.
So it's really it's the most amazing contrast of humor.
But it's still Inspector Pancakes.
Yeah, but he's like grizzly and smoking a cigarette, isn't he? Like the dog. It's like
Yeah. So it's like this grisly, hard-bitten Inspector Pancakes, and then ooh la la, President of France. I need to help you solve a very important crime.
In the main crime, someone has stolen a baguette or something. What is it like in the kid for croissant? That's right.
Somebody stole the inspector or the president of France's croissant, and this is a terrible crime because croissants are very important to French people.
and then the noir version, it's a series of prostitute murders down below, right?
Extremely graphic.
It is. I have literally never seen a book. Has anyone ever come to you with a book that's similar? I've never seen anything done like this before.
So the inspiration for it, like I mentioned, was my dog Edison. So the original title was Eddie Spaghetti, but of course that's so obvious a name that of course it's been used for other things. So I ended up changing it to Inspector Pancakes. But yeah, I mean, do you guys have pets? You know how all the pets have jobs that you make up for them?
Oh yeah.
And rich backstories that you make up for your pets.
Yeah.
So Edison, anytime you would walk into the room, like just randomly, be like, Eddie Spaghetti, did you just get back from France? Were you helping the president solve crimes? He was a high-powered attorney who would fly every day to France to help the president solve crimes. And he had a little briefcase and a little bowler hat.
And out of that came a genius book. So if you have not come across it, I would highly recommend go checking out Inspector Pancakes. Where can people pick that up? Is that from your site or is it available?
I believe you can still get it at topatoco.com.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would highly recommend it. It is a delightful read that I 1,000% keep from my children who can both read. So, but it's great. And so, in general, though, Karla, I want to say thank you for coming on and chatting with us today. This has been delightful to have you. And if you are not familiar with Karla's work, this is your opportunity to go jump in. You can follow her on Twitter at thekarlapacheco.com, and Karla with a K and Pacheco Pacheco. Correct, Karla? Do I have that right?
Yep, that's it.
Because I'm spelling that off the cuff. I just want to make sure. So, who was it, Brad, that I was spelling their name and I did it wrong?
Yeah,
it was Carl Kerschel. It was Carl Kerschel. I spelled abominable wrong.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I wanted to make sure I had that right. And then in general, Spider-Woman and coming up, Betty Page on July.
July 15th, we've got both Spider-Woman #2. We get to find out some more mysteries there from the cliffhanger that I left everyone for 2 months on with the pandemic. And then, so July 15th, we get Spider-Woman #2 and Betty Page #1 from Dynamite, which is basically I'm doing Betty Page on this big, lush island, Knives Out style murder mystery.
Oh, that sounds so good.
That's awesome. Well, Karla, you are awesome for coming on. And
thanks so much,
you look
guys.
well. I'm happy to see your face. And thank you for joining us.
So good to see you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Bye, Karla.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute and stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, Brad and I are going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
Yeah, because, when you do, you'll get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And an exclusive Patreon post that go even deeper on the ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, no worries.
You can still support the show by rating us wherever you get podcasts.
Leave us a 5-star review and a few kind words.
And that, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
And now, let's talk comics.
So, Brad, one thing I wanted to talk to you about was actually you are intimately familiar with it because my train of thought springboarded off of your recent events. So you have successfully completed a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
You've now transitioned it to BackerKit. It's doing gangbusters on BackerKit.
Mm-hmm.
And you are starting the process of sending out rewards and all that sort of stuff, right?
Yep.
But the thing I noticed, you had forwarded me a text or two or an email or two from people that were like at the 50-cent level that are just like complaining out the yin yang, and the people that are at the 500 level are like, yeah, that's fine. But take your time, Brad. I value your work.
Yeah.
And you get me the rewards when you need it. Meanwhile, the people at the 50-cent level are threatening class action lawsuits. They're just champing at the bit to get whatever it is rewarded is at the 50-cent level. It's obviously not at the 50-cent level.
Right.
Just for the purposes of exaggeration. But I've noticed, Brad, and this is true with Kickstarter, it's true with Patreon, and it's true, frankly, with Twitter and Instagram, is that the people that pay less, that support the least, tend to complain the most. And I wanted to ask you about that, about how you handle that as a creator.
It's so difficult because it's so easy to get petty. It is always the people that are contributing the least that are complaining the most. And it's really frustrating, whether you're doing Kickstarter or Patreon. Although I got to admit, I see it much more on Kickstarter than I do on Patreon. But it's always the people that are at the very opening tiers. And there was one guy that was like emailing me on a regular basis the same question, and I was giving him the same answer. And the answer was, you're going to get it in mid-May. That's the schedule. I had already posted an update about that. There was all kinds of outgoing information, and he basically just kept posting the same question on and on and on, and I kept giving him the same answer. There was one person that, since there was a stretch goal, you got one of the books for free. And it was also available for other people to access as an add-on. Because, like, for example, if you're at the digital level, you could still conceivably add on the print version of that stretch goal that you wouldn't have gotten regularly.
Right.
And he had basically added on the stretch goal. And he was very upset, and I literally had to send him a screenshot showing that it showed clearly on the screen that he was getting that stretch goal reward, and he had added it himself. And by the way, I had it super low price for like $5. The amount of anger towards him spending an extra $5, especially when it was something that at a click of a button, I'm like, number one, here's what it said on your screen. Here's where it showed you what you were getting, and you still added that on. Number two, it's a click of a button, and I've refunded you. This is absolutely nothing to get upset about. It's so much would be so much easier if you just sent a polite little, hey, little heads up. I'm not sure where the breakdown happened, but I put this money in and I didn't need to. And then if I wrote back and said, screw you, I got your $5, I'm going to the Bahamas, then you can get upset.
Right.
But it's always the people at the low tiers that are the most aggressive with what they're with any problems. And let's face it, as much as you've done this repeatedly, I've done this repeatedly. And I keep this holds true. There's always something that you miss. There's always a little
a detail
that doesn't go quite according to plan. BackerKit did something new that I really like, and it's called a smoke test. Have you heard about this yet?
A smoke test?
Yeah,
No.
it's brilliant. It worked pretty well. It didn't work 100%, but it worked pretty well. What they do is once you're ready to send out all your surveys to through BackerKit, where people can confirm what they want, confirm their address, and decide if they want any add-ons, they send it out to 5% of your backers before anybody else.
Oh, I see where you're going. Yeah, okay.
It's like a representative sample, and then if there's any mistakes, they say usually we catch them then, and then poof.
That's good. Now, why is it called a smoke test?
I don't know why they call it a smoke
problems.
test.
I guess.
Yeah, or like a smoke detector. Once you get a little whiff of the smoke,
so it's not a fire. It's not a fire alarm. It's a smoke alarm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But so I want to circle back around on this because I have noticed it as a very clear pattern in my Kickstarters, less so like you in my Patreons, but definitely in my Kickstarters.
Yeah.
And to some respects, in Twitter, the people that I know have never bought a book and have never supported either Patreon or Kickstarter are often the first to complain, right?
Yeah.
About whatever it is. And so I wanted to talk to you, about what is that personality, right? Let's try to identify what's happening in their sphere.
Yeah.
And then more importantly, let's identify what we as cartoonists should do or attempt to do to react to people like that.
Right.
In the grand scheme of our career, right? I think that's the best way to be helpful to other cartoonists, to talk about how we do it and how we've succeeded and or failed in doing it in the past, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing that I wanted to posit is that one of the reasons why we might see it more in Kickstarter than in Patreon, and one of the reasons why it's the cheaper levels, is that these are Johnny-come-latelys to our comic.
Right.
Is option one, right? Because if they were Patreon folks, if you're jumping in on Brad Geiger's Patreon, right, even at the $1, $2, $3 level, you're probably been a fan of Brad, right? It's not like you've been reading for a week. But I think Kickstarter has the propensity to bring people in that just discovered it on Kickstarter, or just saw the link, or something about it intrigued them and they jump in, right? But because they're new, they don't want to jump in with both feet, so they dip a toe in for $5, $10, whatever that level is, the digital offerings, whatever it is. And then, lo and behold, 2 months later, when it's time to start fulfilling, they're the first ones to complain, right? That's option one.
Yeah.
Another option is there's something about the personality of people that are cheap that are also the people that complain, right? That's another possibility.
Yeah.
What are the other options?
It's also a sense, there's an entitlement factor there as well. It's like not only entitlement, but the internet, especially with things like Amazon Prime and so forth, we have really seen a move towards instant fulfillment
Oh, yes.
online.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so even with Amazon, through the pandemic, when all of a sudden I ordered stuff and I wasn't getting it the next day or later that night, living in Philadelphia, a lot
Right.
of times I'd order something and get it later that night. And all of a sudden it's like, yeah, you'll get this next week. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You're making me wait for and there was always something
Don't you know I'm
inconsequential.
Brad
Yeah,
Geiger? I
don't
need
you
my
know
toenail clippers tonight.
yeah,
Tonight.
these toenails aren't going to clip themselves, and yeah, but we've really engendered a real kind of instant gratification
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
highly entitled culture on the web, and you can look at that any number of different ways and say, well, it shouldn't be, or it should be, or it just is. But as a creator, what we need to do is, like you said, Dave, talk about how we can deal with that. And especially not only on Kickstarter, where, let's face it, if somebody's ponying up any amount of money, your job as a creator is to treat that person so well that the next time your Kickstarter comes around, they graduate to those larger tiers because you've built up a little bit of trust.
Right. Right.
Part of that means swallowing that instant anger that you're going to feel at this person maybe behaving a little bit badly, and resist the urge to give them a good old fashioned piece of snark. When it comes to online and situations like this on Kickstarter, I revert to my Midwest, to be honest with you, and I kill them with kindness.
Yes. Yep.
You
Yep. 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 Yep.
I absolutely just give them my most nicest language. I give them nothing but compliments. And then, like the guy that had put the ad on, even though it showed on the screen, I gave him a very polite little screenshot, right? A polite little arrow drawn right to where they already were indicating that they were getting this thing. And I said, I can understand how you can miss it. You know what? I'm going to talk to BackerKit because that text might be a little bit small to read, and I
Right.
can see where you could have made a very understandable mistake, and kill them with kindness.
Yeah.
I just because at the end, when you do that, they're listen, they're coming in loaded for bear. They're coming in ready for
There it is again, loaded for bear. Guys, this bullshit phrase that Brad created last week that does not exist in English. He just used it again.
You wait until our listeners hear this. Everybody knows loaded for bear.
That is not a phrase. That's a hill I'm going to die on. You made up that phrase. All right, anyway, so they come in loaded for bear.
And when you kill them with Midwest kindness, they've got nowhere to go. And so many times, if you do it well, you will get the nicest emails in return.
Yeah.
Because they realize that they were itching for a fight and you're not going to give it to them.
Yeah, and so I've got two things I want to add to that.
Yeah.
Number one is, I think Brad and I are professional communicators, right?
Yes.
Among the many titles that we have as a cartoonist, we are professional communicators. Our job is to communicate, right? And to adopt very specific tones. So we're very aware of the English that we are using, the diction that we are choosing, the tone and the tonality of how we're expressing it, right? All of that is very much on our mind as we communicate in emails and tweets and in comics, right? That kind of thing. A lot of people, Brad, I will posit, a lot of people do not realize the tone that they put out when they write.
Oh, I know.
In spoken language, they could be like a mom at church. They're like, oh, it's just a great day here, and here's a donut, and have a great day. And then you put them on email, and like they turn into Karen, and you're like, what's happening? And like, I ordered this 5 weeks ago, and you said it would be 5 weeks, and it's 5 weeks. It's like, yeah, it's coming. And then it arrives at their porch the next day, and like, all right, it arrived. But
it's here now.
Yeah.
You can relax.
So what Brad does and what I do in adopting a tone of kindness is basically like, we're choosing to ignore the fact that they have come at us guns blazing with their tone, because a lot of times I would posit they don't realize they're coming at us guns blazing with either the way they type or the word choice that they have. And so I just kind of look past that toward the bigger picture and respond with kindness. And then 9 times out of 10, Brad, wouldn't you say, like, it actually works out fine? Like, they're like, oh, thanks so much. That's a lovely response. Yep, that seems like a reasonable reason why that happened.
Yep.
Okay, blah, 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 bing, and it's all solved, right?
Yep.
And then the other, even in the tenth situation where they still are coming at us loaded for bear in Brad's made up phrase, even when they're still coming at us, having responded with kindness gets me to my second point, which is that classic business truism that it's cheaper to retain a customer than
Yes.
it is to go out and find and basically buy a new customer, right?
Right.
So if Brad, for example, had said to that person, you know what? I know I had charged you $5 for that, but have it free. And here's the $5 refund for the digital item, right? Like I
Yeah.
don't want to advocate for that, but let's just say Brad that had done that.
Mhm.
He, in all likelihood, had kept a customer that would have cost him many dollars to
Right.
buy a new one to replace that customer, you know? And
Yes.
by many dollars, I mean Brad's literal investment of time, money, energy in Evil Inc. going forward years to
Mhm.
capture somebody new, right, in the months and years ahead. And so in some respects, you could see that in a Harvard Business School kind of way as like a wise investment on Brad's part
Right.
to as a palliative right now to keep them on as a reader or as a customer, so that you don't have to find a replacement rate for a new customer. So I think in both cases, kindness still works, right, Brad?
Right. Well, and that's just the irony. It's not. I mean, I'm giving them kindness, but it's coming from a place of spite, and I'll tell you why. When somebody comes to me looking for a fight, I immediately have the contrarian opinion on this, where I say, "You're looking for a fight." I automatically have a negative attitude towards you, and I'm not going to give you anything that you want. And
Yes,
if
yes,
part of that
yes.
is a fight,
And I
I'm
will
not
win
going to
with
give
my
you a
smile.
fight.
Yeah, yeah.
You're never going to get it from me. I'm going to give you just the opposite, because if you're looking at anything that you want, I'm not going to get
Yes.
other than you want your the stuff that you paid for. Of course, you're going to get that. That was always a given. But you're looking for a fight, never going to happen.
Not gonna get it from Brad Geiger.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
No.
That's a great way to look at it. I will add this too, and this is something you and I have talked about before, Brad.
Yeah.
When someone comes at us, guns blazing, right? Two guys who are cartoonists, whose job ostensibly is to bring joy and laughter and entertainment into the world,
Yeah.
and who, for 99.999% of our communications to the world, are putting out positive messages, right? And the other 0.001% is about how your sandwich wasn't good that day, right?
Right. Right.
So we're putting out positivity in both our work and in our personal communications. When someone is coming at us, guns blazing like that, my immediate thought is like, good God, imagine the person who has genuinely wronged them. And
Right.
also, what is wrong in your life that you're coming at a cartoonist at full speed like this? Where, like, listen, I don't know what Arthur said in some comic 5 years ago that made you this angry, but that talking duck does not deserve this. Like,
Yeah. Well,
it's
not only that, how many times have you seen that play out in your own life, where somebody comes at you really, really in a nasty way, and you find out a month later or a year later, they get back in touch and say, you know what, I was kind of an asshole to you a little while back, and I was going through a divorce, or I just lost my job, or whatever. You always find out that so much of what we read as belligerence is really this person really dealing with some horrible stuff in their own lives, and just doesn't have it in them to be polite with you right now, because
yeah,
there's
it,
so much sadness or anger that's piling up in their own lives.
I don't know if this is a phrase because I don't know anything about psychology, Brad, but you know the phrase cognitive load? Like when you have
Yeah.
too much stuff going on in your brain and you're not able to
Yeah.
process things.
Yeah.
Is there an emotional equivalent in psychology to cognitive load? Like when there's too many things going on emotionally and
Yeah.
and therefore the people around you that like, sir, can I get you fries with that? You can go right to hell, like that kind of thing. Well, there must be an emotional equivalent to cognitive load
Yeah, with
where
like an emotional overload type of
yeah,
thing.
like
Yeah.
basically they also their settings are set so high right now
Yeah.
that minor variations or fluxes aren't registering. So they're
Yeah.
not registering that Brad is speaking calmly and yeah, we can fix
Right.
that for you. And of course, that's no problem with your Kickstarter order. And so they're still coming at Brad, blaring because
Yeah.
they've been dealing with divorce lawyers all week, or a contractor that screwed them out of $40,000, or they got laid off from their job, or whatever it is in their life. And so Brad's minor infraction of a $5 thing that is totally easily fixable still gets the full guns blazing.
Because at that point, everybody's out to get him. And now this cartoonist is out to get me. That's the other reason you want to kill him with kindness, is because 9 chances out of 10, that person is dealing with stuff that you don't even know about. And you'd probably be on their side if you found out about it.
Yeah, it's true. It's a version of, like, if you walked a mile in their shoes, you'd be like, oh God, I see what's going wrong here.
I get it. I think I was an asshole too.
And you know what? I will put one other little capstone on this, and this is also Machiavellian, to Brad's earlier point, is one of the reasons why I killed them with kindness is it gets them out of my life. Right? So not only did they not win by triggering me into an argument or antagonism, I win because they're gone. Poof. Like, I've solved the problem with kindness,
Right.
Bye. Now I'm back to my positivity. I don't have to cycle about this person who's yelling at me, because it does. It takes up cycles of your brain to go through this fight that's happening with this, whoever this reader is online, right?
Yeah.
And so by quickly dispatching them with kindness, I don't know how to say this other than to say I have removed the like, it's like popping a boil, or whatever that old phrase is, from Victorian phrase. And so it's gone. And so I find real value in like, it's kindness, and then you move on. And to Brad's point, 9 times out of 10, you'll find out a year later, they'll be like, hey, I'm really sorry that you might not even remember this, and you don't, but I came at you, loaded for bear. And I know that that's a phrase that I just made up the other day, but I want to say apologize to you.
Now, one thing that we do need to put in here as a button as we wrap this topic up is lots of what we just said, specifically, in my opinion, Dave, goes towards moneyed relationships, Patreon and Kickstarter. If somebody comes after you on social media and they're not, a Patreon backer or a Kickstarter pledger, go back to that advice that we've given you earlier in several episodes. Still, if you choose to address that, do it with kindness. But on social media, especially, and I'm going to tell you right off the bat, and this is going to make me sound like a jerk, and maybe it is. First thing you do when you get a nasty message from somebody on social media is you check the number of followers. And if you've got more followers than they do, your decision is made already. You do not engage.
And why is that, Brad?
All you can do is amplify.
Yep. Because all you're doing is you're bringing your readers to them.
Right. And why would you amplify that? So first thing you do is you check their followers. If they don't have enough followers, instantly that your decision's made for you. Now,
keep in mind, that's not Brad judging someone based on their follower count. That's not him saying this is a worthy person, this is not a worthy person. What Brad is saying is that you are actually drawing a crowd. This is a different way of looking at it. You are drawing a crowd to a fight that didn't need to happen in the beginning. But by responding, you're now bringing your thousands or tens of thousands or whatever it is readers to this fight, saying, hey, everybody, look at this. Look at this person who's being antagonistic, right? So that's different than saying this person has value or doesn't have value. That's not what Brad's saying. Brad is saying you are drawing a crowd, and that's a way of saying, yeah, and you're also making all those people unhappy for seeing, an unhappy person yell at you, right?
Right. There's nothing good that can come of it.
Yes,
basically.
There's nothing good that can come of it. Yeah,
and then if they do have more followers, then you've got to make a decision whether you're going to address that or not. But remember, social media is incredibly fast, very, very fast. And 9 chances out of 10, something like that's a belligerent or a negative or a nasty statement. You just let that go, and it'll filter to the bottom of the goldfish tank where it belongs, and you move on with your life. There's so much on social media that can be solved with denying a fire oxygen, right? And letting that just die out, let it starve out. I really do strongly recommend that. And by the way, people who are, I think people who talk to people like us, like that, who are cartoonists, I think there's a real good way of knowing, like, have I stepped over the line? Have I not? Because, like, Dave, I'm sure you're like me, and you're trying to encourage engagement. So if somebody says something to you on Twitter, that's neutral or positive, you're hitting the like button on that. You're giving them the little heart, right? Also to show that you acknowledge it, you've seen it and stuff like that. If you've said something like Dave or I on social media and they've given you zero engagement whatsoever,
guess
chances
what?
are you were being a schmuck.
Yeah.
How many times I'm telling on myself, Dave, and maybe I shouldn't, but how many times do you go like there's a whole row of responses and you go like, oh, what an asshole. Like, and you've got a whole string of likes except that one guy, and it's like I really hope you look at this someday because I liked everybody but you, and I'll never tell you, but you ought to know it.
Here's how the delightful pettiness in terms of killing people with kindness.
Yes.
Here's how I like to do that, Brad. Sometimes, just out of delightful spite, I will go response.
Yes.
Not even like. I'll be like type, skip. Type. Like everybody gets a response except for Jimmy, because Jimmy was being a jackass.
I'm such a petty person. I've gone into threads where I had no intention of talking to anybody.
Right, exactly. That's what I was getting at. I wasn't going to do response.
You get a comment, you get a comment, you get a comment, you go to hell, you get a comment, you get
Yeah, it's like suddenly you become
admitting any of this stuff, Dave. We gotta shut this whole show down. We should admit it. But it's the truth. I totally, that's exactly how I handle it.
Brad? It's again, we're going back to you're trying to teach your readers that what you respond to is kindness. And so, yes, we are being petty, but we're being petty in a positive way. Like, all those other 20 people got nice, funny, calm, lovely responses. And the one guy who was an asshole didn't get a response. So again, you're training people that what gets a rise out of Brad Geiger or Dave Kellett or you is kindness and humor. And by God, if they're going to be mean or snarky to me, if they are successfully funny, I will respond to that. You know,
right?
I do reward humor. As long as it's well constructed. Like if it's a well-turned phrase, I'll be like, "You got me." You know what? Game recognizes game. I get that. That was good.
But honestly, how often does that happen? Let's put that in. Let's put that in one pile, and let's put this in the other pile. A bunch of people that thought they were funny and failed miserably and ended up saying something jerky as a result.
The ratio is many hundreds to one, and that's I'm not being snarky. A lot of people think they're funny, and they are not. You know, so
and it comes back to being able to understand how communication works too, and listen, text communications are tricky. You've got anytime I write something that I think might be funny, I rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it, even for like a little social media post, not only to make sure that I'm communicating, but to make sure that I'm not miscommunicating and saying something nasty when I was just trying to say something nice. Because there's no worse feeling. And we've all been there.
Right.
But it's like, oh, geez, I meant that as a joke. And then if you go back to it like months later and come at it completely fresh, you'll see where your tone was wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's really tough to do that kind of thing right.
Well, and so speaking of having the right tone, I just want to say a huge shout out and thank you to our sponsors, Wacom, for this week over at wacom.com and the new makers of the Wacom One, which I got to tell you, has been delightful to see. I think we now have a half dozen listeners, maybe more, who have gone out and jumped in on the Wacom One. And we'll go ahead. Brad has an interjectory.
Somebody that I used to go to high school with got in touch with me through Facebook. Got a daughter that's really into manga and has some very developing art skills. And he said, well, I want to get this kid, a digital tablet. Can you give me some advice? I just want entry level. He said, I just want something, because, especially, everybody's on lockdown. Everybody's kind of watching their money a little bit. And I go, oh, my friend, have I got something for you? I said, if you're wanting something that's entry level, that still delivers pro level results, I said, get the Wacom One. It's got a perfect price point. It's got great results. And, it's not going to break the bank. And he ended up getting it and wrote back, thrilled with it. He says, I can't thank you enough. He says, I was looking at this other one and I'm so glad I wrote to you first because I got the Wacom one, and that this kid, I can't wait. I told him, you gotta have the kid through you, not directly, but through you, send me some illustrations, because I cannot wait to see the work that this kid does with her new Wacom one.
That's right. And so once again, we give a huge shout out to Wacom at wacom.com, at the makers of the new Wacom One and the sponsors of this week's Comic Lab.
And that just leaves us to say this. You've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my friend Brad Geiger, the editor of Webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And my friend Dave Kellett, co-director of Stripped and cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from the very talented Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode and all episodes was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode.
And the Comic Lab theme song. And the Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/comiclab. So we'll go ahead and say that like Werner Herzog. Life is a grand misery from which we only rarely awake. And in those moments, it is a hellscape of vulture bird song and screaming violins and the excruciatingly slow murder of our soul. And in those moments, creativity is our desperate fight against those forces. And so I say to you now, patreon.com/comiclab.
Oh my God! Did you have that prepared?
No!
Or did you do that off the top of your head?
It's so easy to do Werner Herzog, Brad. Just think nihilism and like desperation and the gnashing of teeth and the wailing of tears. That's all you need for Werner Herzog. Like, no, did you ever see the documentary where Werner Herzog, he's talking about that cave in France? I think it's in France, that no human has entered in 10,000 years. And so he's like, these footsteps were last made by a human 10,000 years ago. Imagine the pain of their daily existence and their existential fear as tigers, wolves, and bears awaited them outside the cave. Like, everything with Werner Herzog is just about like, oh God, Werner, stop talking. Bounty hunting is a difficult profession. Anyway.
God, that was too good.
Anyway, we'll see everybody next week. That's it. That's all I got.